I'm John Kaiser at the Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver, taking place May 10, 11, 2024. I am here with Robin Dow, CEO of Nevada Organic Phosphate Inc. Robin, welcome to Vancouver.
Hello, John.
Robin, I adopted Nevada Organic Phosphate last fall as a bottom fish company. I've recently taken a stronger interest in it. That's why you are here at this conference. And the reason is that this long ordeal of applying for phosphate permits or leases with the BLM in northeastern Nevada for your Murdock Mountain project is coming closer to a decision.
Yes.
But people are confused about why this is taking so long. Can you explain what the difference is between staking, say, a gold claim in Nevada and applying for a phosphate lease? And also, what's still left for the BLM to do in order to make a decision where you can actually put a drill on the property and prove your story?
Well, just to keep it simple, they define the minerals in Nevada and other BLM territories as locatable or leasable. Gold, silver based metals, copper, zinc are locatable. So you can stake them and then just go from there, normal staking process. Whereas they define phosphate, potash as leasable and treat them like oil and gas. So as a result, we've had to go through a 2-year process of environmental assessment with the BLM and the Nevada State sage-grouse people. And finally, after 2 years, $250,000, within the next, I would say, 2 weeks, we'll come to a point with the BLM where the environmental assessments will be posted on their BLM website for 30 days. They will invite public comment. When that 30 days is over, as long as there's no rabid concerns, then they'll give us our prospecting permit, which will allow us to drill. Right? Because we've applied for a prospecting permit. Prospecting covers everything that includes any portion of soil disturbance, whether you're trenching or drilling. It all comes under that because we haven't been able to trench either. Like this was trenched in 83, 85. And we went back and resampled the trenches to make sure that the data we had was proper in 11 and 12, and then again in 2018, 19. So it's been a long process because we're public, and people are wondering, well, what's going on? Is it 3 cents forever? And I'm happy to say today it's doubled to 6. Thank you, John. Thank you for your putting out your piece.
This area falls within that 20-mile buffer zone on either side of the Santa Fe Railway. That was where every odd-numbered mile-by-mile square in the checkerboard was granted to Santa Fe as private land outside BLM jurisdiction. That's the surface rights and mineral rights both came, but often they've been stripped away. These checkers are not what you're applying for. You're applying for the other even-numbered checkerboard squares with the BLM. Now, getting access to your squares, are you going to have problems crossing the private land that's owned by ranchers or anything? Is that going to be an issue?
No, I think one of the things we've done in the new PowerPoint that you'll have, we've pointed out that one, we have a Google map of the Leech Mountains, which is just crazy. When you look at it, and people will be able to see it online, we're sort of halfway up the mountain, but the top of Murd Mountain's another 1,500 feet, 3,000, 2,000 feet. So what we have is this Mars bar along the edge of the mountain that's 4 meters by 4 meters. But when you get down to what everything looks like in this area, it's all belongs to the BLM. There's very little private ground along this pathway.
So it's outside the checkerboard.
It's apart from the checkerboard, yeah.
Okay.
So what we have is we've we've got a lease, a large lease. We've got 4 leases now that cover 29.9 kilometers. And those leases are in between the mountains, right? Because there's no sense going up the top of the mountain and adding another 1,500 feet to drill. You can see we're here, and we're here, and we're here. People can see it online. That in the mountain range, there are passes. And essentially that's where you have bottom land where we can find our 4 meters. But it's all BLM. There's very little in the way of ranchers checkerboard where we are. And it tends to be outside of what we're looking at this thing. Now, once you get down into the east, right, we've got this big C, letter C that runs from the south around the west up through the north that encompasses 12.25 square miles of ground. It's all within BLM. There's no farmland there. There's no problems with the checkerboard there. So the BLM, and we check with them, they own all the mineral rights for all the ground that we've leased, that we've applied to lease.
Okay.
So it's not a great concern. All right. And in fact, in Canada, the same thing happened with Canadian Pacific. The first and 12th LSDs in a section went to the Canadian Pacific, and that's how the lawyers for Canadian Pacific ended up with it. And the money ended up in the Glenbow Foundation, was all from these odd sections that were granted to the railway that they turned over to their lawyers in lieu of fees. So that's how, including James Lougheed's grandfather, Peter Lougheed's father.
Now, Murdock Mountain is a phosphate story.
Yes.
The phosphorite beds that outcrop there range
Yes.
between 2 and 4 meters.
Correct.
Right? They're on the western edge of the vast western phosphate field, which
Yes.
goes through Idaho into Montana, Wyoming,
BC.
Colorado, even into BC
Sparwood.
and part of Utah.
Mhm.
But in your area, it's about 2 to 4 meters thick.
Mhm.
It dips into the mountains, so you're not going to be able
27
to
degrees.
strip mine anything. You're going to treat it as a coal seam.
Yes.
Since the leases will be in these 6 by 6 mile squares, I assume, based on what you know about the specific gravity, assuming these beds are still reasonably intact, what's the tonnage footprint per lease, and how many leases have you applied for as part of this effort to consolidate this phosphate district?
Well, we've applied for 4 leases that are quite large. There's a maximum, I think it's 2,800 acres per lease you can apply for. And so at the end of the day, we've got 12.25 square miles in this all-encompassing letter C. And there's a lot that we don't have a lease application for that's under the mountain, right? We're at the edge of the mountain. So if you're going to coal seam mine this thing and go under the mountain, just keep going, because it's not farmland. It's not ranch land. Nobody owns it. It's technically BLM. So you just coal mine it and room and pillar, and away you go. So no matter where you look along that letter C in the 12.25 square miles, we're looking at somewhere in the range of 250 million tons. Now, when you consider a Tafos produces 55 to 60,000 tons a year, 250 million tons is of consequence. And it will be the largest organic phosphate resource in North America, perhaps even the world, because the next one we know of is Chatham Rock Phosphate in New Zealand. But that's on an island, and they think it's about 100 million tons. So, and again, if we were running up to 15%, 15% by and large instead of 5, then we have to blend that down to put it on a field. Otherwise, it burns. So the hanging wall is all calcium carbonate, all limestone, and it runs 3 to 5% P2O5. So we just blow that up too, grind it up, blend it up with the phosphate, blend it down to 7 or 6, and then bag it, take it across the street to the rail yard, put it in a car and ship it to the San Joaquin Valley. Or there's a major organic farming area west of Reno. So there's lots of opportunity.
Okay, so you propose to mine this like a coal seam,
Yes,
grind it up,
yes,
and bag it and
Bag it
ship it
and ship
as
it.
a whole rock organic phosphate
correct,
fertilizer.
correct.
This has been known about, these beds have been known about
Centuries.
since the 60s, at least they looked at, but because the grade is, between 10 and 20% compared to the thicker beds in Idaho, which run 20 to 35%, which the fertilizer companies have to chemically process to make MAP and DAP, which is the commercial non-organic
Yeah.
fertilizer, phosphate
Soluble.
fertilizer that the entire agricultural industry uses. Now, why don't they take some of their lower grade material that's in that vicinity and do the same thing and ship it as an organic
Contaminated.
fertilizer?
Their problem's contamination.
With what?
Uranium, selenium, cadmium, thorium. It's radioactive.
So these beds
Are
that are
radioactive.
really rich beds have the problem that their heavy metal
Contamination.
levels is way above the
Minimum.
minimum index
Yes.
that the agricultural department
Yeah.
says is allowable. So they have to strip this out by processing it.
Yeah.
By processing it with acid and so on, you can't qualify it as
As organic.
organic. But what
Right.
makes your beds different?
Well, it's nature. We just happen to be at the edge. Gary Smith, our geo, thinks that because we're at the edge and not in the middle, we were at the leading edge of the water coming across the pond, whatever it was that was there, the lake, and that the precipitation of the heavy metals didn't happen until deeper waters. So as a result, we just don't have it. And again, we're organic and we're the only ones. And it's phenomenal because you would think that there would be others, but they're not known. Like you think that other people had done other sampling in the phosphoric trend in the western U.S. and there's no records of it. The USGS was one of the groups that sampled our area, and their conclusion at all of it was that unless you're 17% P2O5, you can't produce acid. It's not economic. So nobody looked at us because they couldn't make acid. And at TAFOS in their 43-101 2 years ago, their consultant came out and said that we don't produce rock because nobody produces rock. Every vertically integrated fertilizer company for phosphate produces MAP and DAP. And of course, then you get 1 ton of phosphoric acid and 5 tons of phosphogypsum, which is radioactive. You can't do anything with. If you happen to know this First Phosphate in Quebec announced a solution to that problem, but they don't have radioactive problems. They're igneous rock, they're hard rock, they're not sedimentary. And so they announced they've done a deal on a process where they're going to take their phosphogypsum and turn it into sheetrock to build houses.
Mm-hmm.
In an interesting process. And I take my hat off to them. It's a wonderful idea. But we don't have that problem. And if you go to Mosaic in Florida, northwest of Tampa, it's, they've got a hill 5 miles long and 500 feet deep, 500 feet high, of this white phosphogypsum they can do nothing with. So we're sitting here and we have really no capex to speak of. If we were just going to do the 6 kilometers we had to start with, I had a little mantra where we'd get some good old boys to come down and blow it up, another good old boy with a front end loader to dig it up, a couple of good old boys with trucks that truck it down 6 kilometers Montello, drop it on a bed, some other good boy with a front end loader would dump in a grinder. We'd micronize it, bag it into a 1 cube bag, take it across the highway to the railhead, and just put the bag in a freight car. And when the freight car was full, send it to California. No capex, low cost, very low cost. And even at the end of the day, I have no intention of putting this into production. I'm I'm the BS and cash flow guy. I don't get any joy out of rock the way that Gary and Paul Pittman do. And so my view is that this is so large, such an extraordinarily large world-class deposit of a world-class product that's nowhere else in this size, that I'm going to wait until we get it all drilled up. And then there are only 5 companies in the business to have a chat with them and get somebody to give me a big kiss and send me Belize for the rest of my life.
So assuming that you have the permit within 2 months, the 30-day comment
Yeah.
period, and probably 30 days for the
A week.
BLM, only 1 week to respond?
Well, no, they respond during the comment period.
Oh, they do. Okay, so it's a real time,
It's
unlike U.S.
real-time
Forest
active.
Service, which waits
No,
until
this is real-time active.
Okay,
The BLM takes the comments and gives them to Westland, our consultant. Westland turns around and answers it, and the answers are posted.
okay. And are there any seasonal constraints to
No.
drilling the beds that you
No.
wish to assess? So,
No.
so once you have this permit, what's the strategy, the drill strategy? What's it going to cost? And when will that phase be done, to give you an idea of stuff like how consistent is the thickness of the bed? Is it locally disrupted by faulting, so that, you know, pieces here, a pieces there? And also, important part of the assays, do the very low heavy metal contents remain consistently low throughout that? When
Find
could
out.
we hope to know
Almost
about
immediately. Almost immediately. We've got 12 to 14 beds planned. We'll put a CAD in and just, because it's gravel, right? Just get the CAD in, level out the 14 pads over a 6-kilometer distance. And then we go in and we drill 1 hole per pad to start with. And it'll be 150 to 250 meters. And then we will go from there and see if we want to drill another hole per pad or 2 holes per pad. So we're looking somewhere between $600,000 and $750,000, right? And then the great thing about it is, if you're on a pad and you drill it, it's 250 meters, then you take the core and split it, sample it, and send it an hour and a half down the road to Elko, to ALS Chemex, and the next 2 days later, you get your assays back. And you're drilling a hole per day. So that means by the end of the first week, going into the second week, you should start having assays every 2-3 days for the whole drill program, which could be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and it's done. And the assays are in. And the other side is that as we're drilling and we get assays and we're able to say that this is discovery and give the BLM what we see, then we can ask them to relieve us of some of the obligations on the other 3 lease applications, to be able to go put pads down and drill and drill all the way around that 29-kilometer strike length by November.
So pretty much around that Leech Mountain range,
Yes.
where you have identified outcropping phosphorite beds. You have applications ringing this mountain to tie
Correct.
up the down dip projection to
Correct.
a reasonable mining depth.
Correct.
And if the BLM grants all of that, you basically control this substantial, in the hundreds of million plus ton
Yes.
resource of phosphate that qualifies as organic for
Correct.
for the U.S. market, and it's right next to a railway.
Yep.
Where it wouldn't take much to ship it anywhere.
Yeah.
When would it be reasonable to expect an initial resource estimate,
Well,
assuming you get the funding?
Well, the funding, I don't think I'll have a problem getting $600,000-$700,000 to drill. And if we do that, and Gary likes what he sees, I think he's going to be able to get a good idea of the geometry of it fairly quickly with, whether we drill 14 holes or 32 holes. He's going to get a really good idea of what's there. And the assays will tell us whether it's clean top to bottom, east to west. And then he just plugs the numbers in his computer and there it is. It's not a difficult thing because it's homogeneous and contiguous. It's all phosphate and it's close to surface. We're not drilling 1,000 meters down to look for a thin gold vein, whether high grade or not. we're drilling 150 to 250 meters for something that's 30 cents a pound. So, what will make this is the grade, the tonnage, and the distribution, the extent of it. And if it's 200, 300 million tons, that's very large and is, I think, very appealing. Atafo said in its recent release of its financials, is looking for acquisitions, hasn't found anything, hasn't found any ideas. We know that Nutrien are starting to change their strategy to reach out. We'll see where that goes. I'm already in contact with Israeli Chemical, who bought Alana Potash's potash deposit in Ethiopia in 2014. And we've sent a note to Yara, who are the Norwegians, who are mainly in nitrogen in Saskatchewan. So there's, you got 4 or 5 companies in the business, and it's going to be no time at all. Once we're able to say something, for instance, I've come to this conference and went to Vancouver to be able to tell our story retail, but none of the institutional players are paying attention. None of the companies in the space are paying attention, because who are we? We've got nothing. We've got nothing. We don't have a prospecting permit, don't have a drill permit. Once we drill and we start getting results, then everybody's going to perk up. Mm-hmm. And if we get the results we think we're going to get, you're going to have to own it.
Yeah. Once I got my head around what Murdock Mountain was all about, it took me a while. I saw similarities with one of my favorite picks from the past decade, Verde Agritech, and they have a giant field of glauconite, which is a silicate that runs 9 to 11% K2O, and they developed the concept eventually of just grinding it up and shipping it as a whole rock product that you apply directly to the fields as a slow release potash fertilizer, compared to KCl, potassium chloride, which runs about 65% K2O, but is a salt and is never organic because it has to be processed. In what way does Nevada Organic Phosphate differ from Verde Agritech, and in what way is it similar?
Well, the only difference is they're potash and we're phosphate. The green sand they're producing is the same idea. You grind it up, bag it up, ship it out. Farmer puts it on his field, lasts for 10 years, and it's a reagent. So it's brilliant. And as a result of their changing their marketing strategy a couple of years ago, in September of 21, it was $1.25. March of 22 was $12.75. It's gone back down since that time because the price of potash has dropped considerably, from $1,200 down to $400 to $600 a ton. But we're in the same idea. The difference, well, there isn't a difference. There is no current market for rock phosphate, right? For organic rock phosphate. There's some mom and pop carbonate or carbonatite in baggies at your local fertilizer store for the equivalent of $3,400 a ton. That's fine if we can get it.
So this is actually an emerging market that you're developing this resource for, a market that doesn't exist because it can't actually be served.
Correct.
So you're actually trying to accomplish 2 things: prove that this is this type of resource that can be cost effectively underground mined, has the low heavy metal levels that qualify it as a whole rock product, and at the same time, once this becomes known, potential users can look and say, oh, we can add organic phosphate to our crops and start planting for the organic food market.
Well, there are 2 things. One, the real problem with MAP and DAP is it's soluble, so it creates algae blooms. So there's a huge ecology, political pushback on that, particularly in Europe. And so we're just sand. You just put it on your field and let it grow. And it's a reagent because it's a natural product, right? It's sand, it's rock. So it degenerates, dissipates over time as it's absorbed into the ground, into the organisms of the ground. So it's it's not been looked at because it's not there. We're going to take samples from our pulps of the drill and send them to Omri in California for certification organic, and send it to the University of Montana to put in their beds to plant over the summertime to see what will grow. We sort of know it's avocados and almonds and that sort of thing. We'll see how that goes. And also, there's a company in Toronto, Mississauga called Devron, who are soil ergonomic specialists, and we will send them the same thing and get them to see what works in their field. So we have two different groups working at different speeds, different opportunities to see what we can do.
Okay, so this company, Nevada Organic Phosphate, has a market cap below $3 million. And of course, the reason is, and I must emphasize, there is a risk that the BLM never grants these leases and the company cannot proceed. But that's why the stock is $3 million. So the key thing to watch for is a granting of the BLM leases that allows the company to start doing what exploration companies do, which is demonstrate that these beds are there as they think they are and can be mined and turned into this organic fertilizer product. I've been speaking with Robin Dow of Nevada Organic Phosphate Inc. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.